Hello, welcome to the Peaceful Wood Turner. Just like everybody else, I tend to watch a lot of videos and see what people are doing and get some ideas and stuff. So one thing I've seen a lot of is people doing what's known as inside-out turning. And I decided to go ahead and give it a try. So I've cut some pieces of stud lumber. This used to be a 2x4. I've cut it down to 1.5-inch squares so that I can put them together. It's not the best lumber to be using for this, but I think it's probably a pretty good choice for an attempt project, a learning trial practice thing. And being that it's 1.5 inches, I'm going to end up with a really large piece to start with, which is really good for me. I actually did try this already once and screwed it up horribly. So this is my second attempt. I've learned a little bit. A couple things I learned. One is don't take off too much of the material. Another thing is think about how you're gluing everything together. And in that vein, I've kind of laid everything out already. And I've got an old paper bag here that I'm using as a barrier. I saw this technique done on another video. I thought it looked like a pretty good idea, and actually when I did my earlier failure, it worked out pretty well for the most part. There's much more operator error than it was a problem with the methodology. So, there's first two pieces stuck together. Now you'll see there's a lot of nail holes and stuff in this. This is, like I said, some reclaimed lumber. And I actually did have to take some nails out of it as I was working it. I ran it through my table saw and discovered that there was a nail that I missed. So I ended up having to try to drive that thing out using another nail. Luckily I succeeded and was able to get back to work. I call myself the Peaceful Wood Turner, and it's more of a aspiration than a reality. Trying to keep myself from getting overly frustrated with my work. And trying to just get things done nicely. Sometimes a bit of a challenge. I've got a little excess paper right here, and I'm just going to roughly cut it off. Alright. That's not going to be quite enough there. But that should work well right there. Please ignore any labels you see on my bag or anything. It's not an endorsement, it's just someplace that somebody I know likes to get coffee. Not being a coffee drinker myself, I don't do as much of that. So that's well smoothed. I'm going to roughly trim this one off. Put some glue on this. A little more than some that time. A little use of the old finger tool. And I'm going to put a layer right there just so that I don't end up losing the peaceful side. Okay, that should be pretty good. Time for some clamps. So I've got the piece in the lathe, and I've got my speed set for about 680 RPM, and I'm going to start off with just the roughing gouge and just kind of take this a little smooth. we got a pretty good round here, so I'm going to switch out tools. Okay, I made a little change to the camera angle. I cleaned up a bit, and I'm going to speed up and use my spindle master. So I'm going to go to 1200 RPM. Okay, it looks pretty nice. Time to get out the sandpaper. Alright, we'll move up now to a 320 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to do that same canoe method I was just doing because I really liked that. That was working pretty well. Very nice, going to move up to a higher grit. Okay, I've sped up my lathe to 1700 RPM and I've got a 600 grit sandpaper here. Let's take one look before we move on to the next grit. It's looking very nice and smooth in all of those areas. I'm going to have to figure out a way to get some of this rough stuff off of here because that's going to be on the inside, so I need to figure that out. I'm going to do that before I move on to my final grit. So I'm going to go back to a heavier grit, 120, and I'm going to see if I can just take these off without hurting anything. Okay, I've got that down to very smooth. So my final grit is going to be a 2000 grit before I put on my finish. Okay. Alright, I'm going to do a tongue oil finish on this. So I'm just getting some oil onto my cheesecloth here. And I'll start rubbing it in. I've kept it at the same RPMs, about 1700 RPM. I might speed it up, but for now this I think would be good. Alright, my finish has dried. I am not real happy with the color, but I do like the shine that it has. So my next step now is going to be to take this apart so that I can re-glue it and then turn it again. So I'm just going to get my chisel in here and try to take these spots out without deforming the wood too much. Let's see what we've got. Well, that looks like it wants to come apart now, doesn't it? Hopefully I won't have too much tear out. Oh, that came out really nicely. I'll be able to clean that off really well. Let's hope I get as much luck here. It's not real happy about coming apart. Let's try the other side, see if we can get a little bit better. Look at that. Splitting right down the middle. Alright, that came out very nicely. That is a smooth transition there. Alright. So my next step is going to be to glue these together. And what I'm going to do is use my marks from my tools to help me line up so that I get things kind of straight. I'm going to try to look and see if I like how the grain is running on them. Let's see if I can switch these around a little bit. Maybe something like that. Alright. That's looking pretty good. So I think that is my layout. I'm going to grab my pencil here and just give myself a couple marks so that I know where everything's going. Alright, time to get gluing. Okay, so when I laid my pieces out, you can see the sides here. These are the parts that are going to get glued. I really didn't like how some of it was looking. Some of it's kind of, well, more beat up than I want it to be, but more importantly, there's things like some leftover glue and paper and things like that that kind of dripped out. So what I'm going to do is just hit it with the sander real quick and just kind of knock it down. Okay, my glue is set. I've got the piece mounted back on the lathe, and I've got it set for about 1100 RPM, so it's time to start making it round. grit. Okay, I'm liking that. I'm gonna just do some cleanup and then we'll put a finish on it. Okay, I've got my lathe turned up to its highest speed. It's about 3,900 RPM, and I'm gonna put some tongue oil on. Alright, that's a good first coat. I'm going to let that dry for a bit and I'll come back and hit it again. Okay, the pieces had plenty of time to dry. I've cleaned it up a little bit. There was a lot of sanding dust on the inside. I'm going to switch off now to a Danish oil. Go for a little bit darker finish on the outside. I think that might offset the inside really nicely. Okay, we're going to let that set and I'm going to touch it up a little bit. And we'll do a few more coats. Okay, my finish is dried. It shows every place where I didn't take care of my tool marks real well, so I learned a lot there. I definitely have to work harder on that. I'm going to just part it off at this end, then I'll reset everything and take off the other end and get started on finishing the whole project. Okay, here we have the finished product. I've sanded it down. I did finish off the top. You can see that being an end grain, it really took the finish very darkly. I really like some features of it. I like the character in the wood with the nail holes and everything else. I like how the interior looks. My biggest problem with it is that I really didn't get all these tool marks out, and I didn't really get the shape that I wanted. So there's some learning still to do, but all in all, I think that's pretty good for a first inside out. Thank you for joining me on the Peaceful Woodturner.